Okay, guys. Today let's see about AWS VPC. So actually, it is one of the very important concepts when it comes to cloud. Okay. So what is VPC? So VPC it will logically isolate networks. Okay. It will separate the resources into separate groups. Okay. So you can have separate IP ranges and then subnets, route tables, everything, and then you can configure your own resources within your VPC. So let's consider. So we can have any number of VPCs. So let's assume this as your AWS account. Okay. So inside this you will have multiple VPCs. So let's let this be one. So all these are different VPCs. So, in case if you want to isolate all the components, you can isolate. So, whatever components you create inside VPC1, it will not be able to access the resources in VPC2 by default. So, in case if you want to enable connection, you can enable, but by default, VPC1 is separate, VPC2 is separate, and VPC3 is separate. So, you can have your own networking. You can have your own networking. You can have your own resources created. Okay, so like EC2, um, whatever resource you want, you can create separately. So by default, we are isolating it. So we are isolating it so that it will not have any connection between them. Okay. If you want, we can enable, but by default, it will be separate. Okay. So for example, in case if in your organization, if you have like two startups, okay, and then you can assign them the same cloud account, and then you can create separate VPCs, and then we can create resources inside them so that one VPC will not be able to talk with the other, so that the resources will be separate. Okay. So we have VPC, and then we have something called subnets. Okay. So subnets are nothing but VPC we will be providing certain range that is called CIDR notation. So here they have given us 10.0.0.0/16. So slash 16 means it is like 255.255.0.0. That is the subnet value. How I am telling that? So by default, how we will have the CIDR block. So the CIDR block will have ranges like 255.0.0.0, 255.255.0.0, 255.255.255.0, and then like this we will have. So here only one is there, right? So this is like binary value of 255. So for example, if you take this, by default, the max number it can have is 8 bits. Okay, so 8 bits will have the value of 255. So here the maximum number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So it will be slash 8. So here we have 8 plus 8. Okay, so 16, and then 8 plus 8 plus 8, 24. Similarly, you can have any number. Okay. Um, Okay, so this is how CIDR blocks is created. So they are assigning CIDR block of 255.0.0/8 or 16. In case if we are giving 8, the next subnets which we assign, it should be like slash 12 or slash 16, whatever it is, we can give like that. Okay, but it cannot be like before this CIDR block, like 7, 6, we can't give this to the subnets. Okay, so in our example, we have taken CIDR block as 10.0.0./16. Okay, so the CIDR block should be more than this one. Okay, if we increase the CIDR block range, then actually the number of IPs which we assign, it will be reduced. Okay, so these subnets. So subnets are like we are splitting this CIDR notation into smaller parts. Okay, because we can't have single CIDR node and create machines, right? So in case if you want multiple networks, we can create them into smaller sub particles, sub nets. So we can have multiple subnets and multiple private subnets. Okay. So what is public subnet and what is private subnet? So for example, you have an VPC, and then for example, let's consider an example of Amazon. Okay, so Amazon, it has a website, right? Web page. So in web page, we will be able to see all the products. Okay, so this has to be visible to entire world. So this web page, it should be visible to all users, right? All users should be able to see this web page. So this should be placed on public subnet. Okay, if all the users have to see this one, we have to place it in public subnet. But this web page will have some databases, right? It will have some DBs. So these DBs will have like secure data. So this shouldn't be accessed by anyone. So we should place this one in private subnet. So as this public subnet has to be accessed by all the public users, it can be placed in internet. Okay, internet. So this cannot have any internet access. So we will be placing it in private subnet. Okay. So subnet is nothing but it is the part of it is like splitting the actual CIDR block into multiple sub blocks. Okay. And then we have internet gateway. Okay. So let's take this one. So now let's consider an example. Okay. Now we have a startup company. Okay. We have a startup company. Let's consider this as Netflix. Okay. So this Netflix company, they have a web page. Okay. They have a web page and they have DB. Okay. So web page has to be placed in public subnet and then DB has to be placed in private subnet. Okay. So they give you a task. Okay. They give you a task so that you have to configure a secure network. Okay. Secure VPC to host their application. Okay. So they have an so Netflix, they have an application. They have an application and you have to create a safe network because you are an architect. So what are all the components you need to configure? First, we need to create a VPN. Okay. Then you have to give the range of IPs. Range of IPs called CIDR block. Okay. For example, here we are giving 10.0.0.0/8. Okay. And then you have the web page, right? So this web page has to be placed in public subnet because public subnet. Why it has to be placed in public subnet? Because Netflix has the video content, right? Video content has to be viewed by users, end users. In case if they are not viewing, how they will get revenue, correct, right? So it has to be placed in public subnet. So end users, for example, end users are there. So for example, we have mobile or else TV. We are trying to watch Netflix, okay? So it should have internet, correct, right? So this internet connection, it will go inside this one and it will connect to the public subnet. So in case if this actually we are viewing the content, okay? So it is going out and 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 then when we publish, it is going out. When we are viewing, it is coming in. So it should have an internet gateway, okay, to connect to the internet gateway. You can assume this as a main gate to any of the building. So only through this it will come. Okay. So we have this VPN like VPC. Okay. VPC, and then we have given the range of IP addresses CIDR block to this VPC, and we have created a public subnet, and we have configured the internet gateway. So what happens? We are able to publish the data, and users were able to consume the data. Okay. Now we have the databases. Okay. Now we have the databases. To place that one, we have to create a private subnet. So here we are placing DBs. Okay. So we have a startup called Netflix. They have a web page. So that web page has to be placed in public subnet. That web page, it will be hosted in like EC2 or S3 bucket. In case if it is static, we can host in S3 bucket, whatever it is. They are hosted in public subnet, and this data, it is saved in private subnet. And we are configuring a internet gateway. What is the use of internet gateway? Internet gateway use the entry point for the internet. Okay, and then for example, you are using some Nginx application, and then that has to be upgraded. But that application is deployed in private subnet. Okay, but how it will get internet? So in order to get internet, you have to configure NAT gateway. Okay, you have to configure NAT gateway. So what is the use of NAT gateway? NAT gateway, it will be hosted in public subnet. Okay, it will be hosted in public subnet because this also requires internet, right? So it will be hosted in internet, public subnet, but this will be connected to private subnet. Okay, so we have done all this. Okay, um, for example, we have private subnet, public subnet, everything. So it is created in the VPC. But how does it know? Like it has to go to this internet gateway, and how does this private subnet it will know like how it should go to NAT gateway? How we will get to know? We will be getting to know using route table. Okay, route table is nothing but it will have the path. Okay, for example, if private subnet has to communicate to internet, it has to go to NAT gateway. So we have to define a path. In case if we don't know the path, for example, if we are going from uh, Delhi to Bangalore, it will have a path, right? Like we will be using some maps or something. So let's consider that as route table. In case if we are not knowing the path, instead of going from Delhi to Bangalore, we may end up in Mumbai or some other location, right? So it should have a path. So how that the path is defined? It is defined using route table. Okay, so what are the concepts we have seen? We have seen CIDR block, what is public subnet, what is private subnet, what is route table, what is internet gateway. So these are things, and then we have something called NACL, NACL. Okay, and then we have something called security group. Okay, so what is NACL? NACL is like stateful firewall. What is it? Stateful firewall. And then security group is stateless, stateless firewall. So, in case if you are defining some rules like inbound rules or outbound rules, you no need of defining explicitly inbound or outbound. If you define one rule, it will be applicable for both incoming traffic and outgoing traffic. That is in NACL. Okay, but in security group, you have to specifically define in inbound traffic and outbound traffic. So inbound rules and outbound rules you have to specify for both. But in NACL, you can define one and it will be allowed or denied for both. Okay, so these NACLs, it will be configured at subnet levels. You can configure these two subnets like for public subnet and private subnet. But security groups, it will be assigned to instances, EC2 instances inside the public subnet. Okay. So now let's try to design an architecture. So this is AWS VPC. Okay. So this VPC has two subnets. Okay, so this is public. Public subnet, private subnet, and then we have configured a IG. IG is internet gateway, and then while the data comes, so we have public subnet, private subnet, and then we are configuring a NAT gateway. NAT gateway. So NAT gateway, it should be in public subnet, and then this will be connecting to okay, it's not coming properly. NAT gateway, it will connect to private subnet, and then we will have NACL. This is network access control, and then we will have subnets. Okay, subnets will be inside, not subnets, it is security group. Delete. Security group, and then we can have another security group here. Okay, and then we will have route tables. Route table 1, route table 2. Okay, so the connection will happen like this. Okay, so in case if we have a web app, it is hosted in public subnet, and then we have defined the rules. Okay, inbound and outbound rules in public subnet. So this will go into NACL. Okay, so first it will have the rules. Okay, rules. So rules will be defined in route tables. Okay, so like where it has to go, those things will be defined here, and then we will have NACL, and then from NACL it will go to internet gateway, and from internet gateway it will be sent to different users. Okay, and then we have private subnet. It doesn't have internet connection by default, so using NAT gateway we can have the private subnet, so it will have the rules. Okay, using the route table, like whether this private subnet, it has to connect to NAT gateway or somewhere, so these things will be configured in the private subnet. Okay, so this will have separate CIDR range. For example, 10 dot, for example, this VPC is 10.0.0.0 slash 8. Then this will be 10.0.1.0 slash 16. This will be 10.0.2.0 slash 16. Okay, so it will be like in different range. Okay, so this like this we will be assigning the subnet IPs, and then NAT gateway, route tables, security groups, NACL, so VPC peering, VPC endpoints. So in case if we have multiple VPCs, okay, in case if we have multiple VPCs, to connect them, we will be using VPC peering and then VPC endpoints. And then what is elastic IP? So we have elastic IP something. Okay, let's see that one. So for example, you are creating an EC2 instance. Okay, you are creating an EC2 instance here. Okay, and then you are given IP address, public IP address. You are restarting it. When you restart, the IP address which was assigned here, it will be removed, and then new IP will be given. Okay, so what happens, for example, let's assume we have a user. Okay, he knows the IP address. For example, he knows the IP address like 10.0.1.3 or 1.13. Okay, so at this IP address we have Netflix. Okay, but in case if we restart that EC2 instance and the IP address changes to 10.0.1.2, 1.57, how we will know the IP address has changed? He can't, he will not be knowing, right? Similarly, if an application is hosted on particular IP and if it changes, those things, it will affect the end applications, right? Because if case we have an organization, let's assume this as Netflix, okay, and we have an office called FB, okay, Facebook. So they are using this application, okay. For example, they are using their application, and while data is coming in this NACL, they would have blocked, okay, they would have blocked 10.0.1.57. They might have allowed 10.0.1.13. Similarly, they might have allowed these IP addresses. When a new IP comes with the 10.0.1.57, it will block, it will not give the access, right? So that application will be impacted. So in order to avoid that one, we have a concept called elastic IP. Okay. So what is elastic IP? Elastic IP is that it will have constant IP. For example, if we have an IP address of 153.1.2.57, and if we assign this IP address to this EC2 instance, no matter if we restart or whatever we do, this IP address, it will not change. It will be constant. Okay. So that is the use of elastic IP. Okay. So these are all the main concepts of VPC. Now let's see the demo. Okay. Okay, guys. So we have logged in. Let's see. Okay, so we have searched for VPC and we are here. Okay, now let's try to create a VPC. Okay, create VPC, VPC only. So I'll give this VPC name as demo VPC. Okay, and then CIDR block I will enter manually. Okay, when you give the when you create a VPC, you have to first assign the CIDR block range. So here we have given this one, right? So let's assume this one 10.0.0.0/8. Okay, so we have given /8 and then no IPv6 and then that's it. Create VPC. Okay, it's asking for 16. Create VPC. Okay, so the VPC is created. Okay, so what is the first step? We have created the VPC. Okay, now we have to create the subnets, public subnet and private subnet. Okay, so we have the VPC. Let's go to VPCs. So we have two VPCs. By default, we have this default VPC and this demo VPC is the one we created. Okay, and for default VPCs, we will have the IP address of 172.31.0.0/16. This is default. No matter it is me, you, or whoever, when they see the default VPC, they will have this IP address range. Okay. So now we have created demo VPC. So this VPC, we are splitting it into subnets. Okay. Click on subnets and then create subnet. Okay. Here I will create soups. Select the VPC. This is the demo VPC, right? Demo VPC. And then we are giving the name. Okay. Let's give it as public subnet. Okay, and then availability zone. For what is availability zone? So in case if we take a region, for example, if we take a region, for example, India. So here we may have multiple availability zones. Okay, one is in Mumbai, one is in Chennai, one is in Bangalore. So these are availability zones. Okay, this is region. So region is like a big area, and like availability zones are inside that region. We will have multiple availability zones. Okay. So here we have three availability zones. Okay, but we no need of selecting that one, so that it will by default assign to any of the availability zones. Okay, and then IPv CIDR range, it is automatically taken, and then we have to give the CIDR range. We have to give the CIDR range for this subnet. Okay, let's take it as 10.0.1.0/24. Okay, so we have given this CIDR block and then create. Okay, so we have got public subnet. Now let's try to create private subnet. create. Okay, we have to select VPC, and then we can give the name as private subnet. Okay, and then availability zone, let it select automatically, and then we can give the IP address range 10.0.2.0/24. Okay, these subnet, so always the range should be more than this one. Okay, it cannot be like 15 or 14. Let me select 15, it will throw error. Okay, you will let me select 15. See, there is overlap. Okay, so we have to select 24, 24, 25, whatever you want you can take. Okay, create subnet. Okay, so private subnet is created. So what we have done, we have created a VPC and we have created two subnets. Okay, these subnets are in the demo VPC which we have created. It is in demo VPC. These are in default VPC. Okay, now what we have to do, now we have to create the internet gateway. For example, now let's try to create an EC2 instance. Okay, EC2 instance, launch instance. Let's keep it as public. Okay, public, and then T2 micro, key pair. Okay, dev, and then security group. Um, we have already. Okay, we have one. I will just select this one, and then come edit in networking. You select by default, it is selecting default. So we have to deploy it in demo VPC, right? So select this one, and then we have to auto assign the public IP. Okay, by default it is disable, but we have to click on enable. Okay, when you use like default VPC, it will be enabled, but when you are creating your own VPC, you have to click on enable. So in case if you are not disabling, you will not get the public IP. Okay, so let's enable this one.
Do we need a public IP for private subnet?
No, not required. Okay, let's create one security group, and then we can launch instance. Okay, okay, so we have created an EC2 instance. So this EC2 instance, it is created in public subnet. Okay, now let's try to open this one. So we have got the public IP address. Okay, this public IP address we have. So now let's try to connect to this one. When we try to connect, actually it will not connect. Why? Because we have not enabled the internet gateway, because this public subnet should have the internet gateway enabled, otherwise it will not connect. Okay, so it is failing. Okay, so now we have created one instance here, and then now let's try to create another EC2 instance. Okay, launch instance, let's name it as private. Okay, and then T2 micro, key pair we can select same, and then edit. So here we have to select demo VPC, and then it is private subnet. Okay, and then auto assign public IP, we have to keep it disabled because this is private, right? It shouldn't have internet connection. So we are keeping it as disabled, and then we are creating separate like security group like launch wizard 3, and then launch instance. Okay, so this is done. Now we have two EC2 instances. One is in public subnet and another is in private subnet. Okay, now in case if this public subnet has to connect to um, internet, then what and all we have to configure? First we have to configure route table. Okay, without route table, this public subnet we have. Okay, now let's try to create a internet gateway. Okay, and one more thing guys, we can have only one internet gateway per VPC. In one VPC we can have only one internet gateway. Okay, now let's come to VPC. Let's come to VPC. So here we have internet gateway. Okay, if we have, see here, we have internet gateway. Let's try to create an internet gateway. Okay, so my IG, I am giving it as my internet gateway, create internet gateway. Okay, so the internet gateway is created. Okay, so I have to attach this one to the VPC. So actions attached to VPC. Without now this internet gateway, it is not connected to VPC by default. So in case if we have multiple VPCs, we can connect to any of the internet gateways. Okay, so now attach to VPC. So we have only one VPC that is not assigned, right? So it is automatically showing here. So in case if you have multiple VPCs, it will show multiple so that we can assign to any of the one VPC. Okay. So select this one. So attached to internet gateway. So now what happened? Now we have internet gateway. We have created it separately. We have separately created internet gateway and we have attached it to VPC. So we have this VPC. So we have attached it to VPC. Okay. But we have not assigned it to public subnet, right? So how we can assign it to public subnet? So using route table, okay, using route table, we can connect to internet gateway. Okay, now let's try to create the route table. So we have route table. So create route table, public RT route table, select VPC, demo VPC, okay, and then create route table. Okay, now here we have created the route table. Okay, but we have not told this route table. We have now we have created a route table RT1. Okay, now this is we have created, but we have not assigned it to whether it has to go to public subnet or a private subnet, right? So what we have to do, we have to do the association. So subnet association, we have created this route table, but we have not told like to which subnet, right? So we have subnet association. So here edit subnet association. So for which we have to assign, we have to assign to public subnet. Save. Okay, so we have done the subnet association. So subnet without explicit association. We have one more subnet, it is not assigned, but we don't want this to be assigned to private subnet, right? We want only for public subnet. Okay, and then we have edge association, route propagation. Okay, come to routes. So here route is nothing but route, which you tell, right? So we have to define the routes. Okay, edit routes, click routes, add route. So now what we are doing, we have created the RT1. So we have to tell this RT1 from public subnet. We have already attached this one, so both are connected. Now what we have to tell this route one, please connect to the internet gateway. So we have to tell it to connect to internet gateway, right? So we can come here, add route. So from everywhere, here internet gateway. Okay, internet gateway, and then we can have multiple internet gateways, right? So we can select which internet gateway. So this is the one which we created, my IG. Just select that one, save changes. Okay, now let me try to connect this one. Public connect. So we have configured subnet, route table, and internet gateway. Okay, it should work. It's not working. Okay, if you see here, it has connected. Okay, so what we have done, we have created the internet gateway, we have created the route table, and then we have created the public subnet. So this thing is completed. So now what we can do, we can deploy the web app. We can deploy our web app like Netflix, so that users will be able to access it from outside. So because we're able to access it, right? So sudo yum update. So it is working. Okay, So everything is working fine. So this is okay. Now we have to configure the private subnet. Okay, so to configure private subnet, uh, we have installed we have created an instance in private subnet, and then we have configured a security group, and then now we have to create a route table. Okay, before route table, how we can get internet access to this private subnet? Okay, now if we see this private instance, we have two instances, right? So if we come to this private instance, actually it will not have the public IP address. Then how to connect to this one? So normally, in case if you want to do it from your terminal, you can do it. Uh, Now let's try to connect it using this EC2 instance connect. Okay. So in case if you have to connect it using EC2 instance connect, then actually you have to use connect using EC2 instance connect endpoint. Using endpoint we can connect. Okay. So it is there. Now select an endpoint. So we don't have an endpoint. Let's create an endpoint. Okay. So using this endpoint, it will connect to that one. Okay. Okay. I will give it as private, and then EC2 instance endpoint connect, and then VPC. So demo VPC, and then security group. Let it be create endpoint. Okay. Subnet. Okay. Where do you miss subnet? Okay. This is security group subnet. Okay. We have subnet here. So we have to create it to private subnet. Okay. And then tolerance endpoint, create endpoint, private EC2 endpoint, VPC demo, private subnet, create endpoint. Okay. So the endpoint it will be created. Let's wait for it to complete. Meanwhile, you can refresh. So it is in progress. Let's wait for it to complete. In case if you want to connect from terminal, then you can just copy the PEM file and then you can try to access that one. But I don't have access because of some restrictions. That's why I'm using this method. Okay. Still it is in pending state. Let's wait for it to complete. Okay, meanwhile, once let it create. Meanwhile, let's try to create the NAT gateway because we need NAT gateway, right, to connect to private subnet. So let's go and create the NAT gateway. So if we come here, let's open a new duplicate tab, VPC. So here, if you see here, we have something called NAT gateway. Okay, let's click on that one, create NAT gateway, and then my NAT. I will just give it as my NAT and subnet. Okay, what I told, this NAT gateway, it has to be placed in public subnet. Okay, because this also requires internet connection, right? So okay, so we have to place it in public subnet. So we are getting all these things. Just select public subnet. Okay, and then connectivity type public, and we have to assign elastic IP. I have told you right before what is the use of elastic IP. In case if you want constant IP address, then we have to use elastic IP. Okay, so allocate elastic IP. So if you see here, an name is given and create NAT gateway. Okay, so the NAT gateway is created. Okay, and then now let's configure the route table. Okay, now we have created NAT gateway and we are trying to create subnet. So that is in progress, we can do. And then we have one more important thing called route table, right? So we have to configure route table. Okay. So let's come to route table. So we have public and private. What is this? Okay. We have only create public route table. Let's try to create private route table. Okay. Create private route table. Okay, and then select VPC. VPC is demo VPC, and then create route table. Okay, now we have subnet association. Okay, because uh, we have this subnet, private subnet, but we have to connect it to this route table, right? Otherwise we can use the same thing to public subnet as well. So first we have to associate these two things. Okay, so come here, subnet association, edit subnet association. We have to associate private subnet. Okay, save association, that's it. And then routes. So we have to define the path, right? Like where it has to go. So here we have defined this route table to go to internet gateway. But here in our case, this route table, it has to go to NAT gateway. It has to go to NAT gateway. So then only this NAT gateway, it will have internet connection. This NAT gateway will have internet connection, so that in case if you want to update something, we can update to this private subnet. Okay. So before that, let's try to see whether it's created. Okay, so it is created and then connect. So what we are doing, we are trying to connect to the private subnet. Okay, so we have this machine. So what is the IP address? 10.0.2.28. Okay, so we have this private IP. We don't have public IP, right? Now let's try to update, like sudo yum update. What is it showing? So it has stuck. Why it has stuck? Because it doesn't have any internet connection. Why? Because it is in private subnet. Okay. Now let's try to give the internet connection. Okay. Because we have hosted the DB here. Okay. We have hosted our startup company's DB here. So it requires some update or patching or whatever it is, right? Patching we will be doing monthly or something, or something, right? So to do that activity, we need internet connection. So how to get internet connection? So now what we have done? So we have created a NAT gateway, and then we have created the route table, and then we have created the private subnet. Now we have to connect this route table, and then we have associated this route table with public subnet. Now we have to connect this route table with NAT gateway. Okay, when we connect to NAT gateway, we will get the internet access. Okay, now let's try to do that one. Okay, so we have this route table. Now subnet association we have done, and then we have to configure the routes between this route table and NAT gateway. So edit routes, add route from everywhere to NAT gateway. Okay, select this one and then select NAT, save changes. Okay, we have associated. If you see, automatically it downloaded. Okay, as soon as we connected, it downloaded, right? So if you see, completed. So if you see, I'm able to connect to the internet, but it doesn't have public IP. So what does it have? It has only private IP. But what is happening? It is able to connect to the internet. How? Through NAT gateway. Okay. So this is the important concepts of VPC. And then in the meanwhile, let's see one thing. Okay. So we have instances. What is the use of elastic IP? We will have the constant IP. Okay. So if you see this public instance, we have the IP address of 3.14.15.33. Okay. So we have that one. We have this one. Now what I will do, I will try to restart this one. I will try to stop this one. This is public. Okay. I will try to stop. Okay. I have stopped. Okay. Now I am trying to start it. Start instance. Okay. Let me force stop that one. Okay. And again, starting instance. Start instance. So what was the IP address before? 3.14.15.33. Okay, so what happens when we restart? It has got new IP, 18.220.230.181. So in case if one application it was trying to access this IP, now the IP address has changed. So it will not be able to contact this machine. Okay, so they have introduced elastic IP. Okay, so for load balancers and all, they will be assigning this elastic IP so that they will have constant IP addresses. Okay, now let's go to VPC, and then we have elastic IP, right? So select this one. So let me release this elastic IP, but it is already associated to this NAT gateways and all. So let me try to create another elastic IP. Okay, so I will just allocate. Okay, so refresh. What is this one? Okay, allocate elastic IPs. Okay, so we have this one. So we have this IP. Now associate elastic IP address. So here if we come here, we have the option. So we can assign it to an instance. Okay, otherwise we can associate it to the network interface. So let's choose the instance. So we have two instances, right? So click on the private. So if we come here, we have the IP address of 18.220.230.181, right? So it will, when we restart, it changes. Now let me come here and associated with the public IP. Okay, so what is the IP? 52.15.85.90. So here it was like 18, right? Now let me associate it with this one. Associate. So we have this one. Let me refresh. So the IP address is changed. It is elastic IP. Now let me try to restart this instance. Okay, 52.15.85.90, right? So this is the one. So this is the IP. Now let me try to restart this one. Instant state, stop instance. So even though if I stop and start the instance now, it will have the same IP 52.15.85.90 because this is an elastic IP. Okay. And then guys, actually for elastic IP, the charges will be more actually. Okay. So when case if you are not using, you can just try to release that one. Okay. So it has started. It is running. But what is the IP? Same IP 52.15.85.90. 85.90, same thing. Okay, so when you assign elastic IP, it will have the same IP address. Okay. Okay guys,
Okay.
thank you.